The Galactic Council's fleet was in chaos. What was supposed to be an easy invasion had turned into a nightmare. Human warships, faster and deadlier than anything seen before, tore through their formations. Energy barriers blocked their strongest attacks, and their communications were failing. The mighty Council, which had conquered countless worlds, was now struggling to survive against a species they had called primitive. On Earth, General Ethan Carter watched the battle with sharp eyes. The Council had believed humanity was weak, but they had never seen the weapons hidden beneath the surface. While the aliens thought Earth was defenseless, secret fleets had been built in deep space stations, cyber warfare had been perfected, and battle strategies had been designed for this very moment. Humanity had never planned to surrender. They had only been waiting for the right time to strike. Across the galaxy, Council-controlled planets began experiencing strange malfunctions. Defense grids went offline, military bases lost contact, and entire fleets found themselves unable to move. Humanity's war wasn't just fought with ships and guns. It was fought in the shadows, in code, in sabotage. The Council had believed Earth was alone. They were wrong. Humanity had prepared for total war. Chancellor Vec watched in horror as another dreadnought exploded outside his flagship's window. His fleet, the strongest in the galaxy, was being torn apart. He turned to Corin, his voice shaking. "We underestimated them." Corin could only nod. The war was no longer about forcing Earth's surrender. Now, the question was whether the Council would survive at all. "You said the battlefield was chaos." Alien warships, once symbols of unstoppable power, burned in orbit. The Galactic Council's mighty fleet, the same one that had conquered countless worlds, was now struggling against an enemy they had believed was already defeated. Inside the Council flagship, Chancellor Vec's hands trembled with fury. He had ordered the destruction of Earth, yet his fleet was the one falling apart. "How are they doing this?" he growled. Corin, his chief strategist, stared at the battle display in disbelief. "Their technology. It's not what we expected. This isn't the Earth fleet we fought before. This is something else." Vec slammed his fist onto the console. They were supposed to be desperate, weak. Where did they get these weapons? Corin had no answer, because the truth was terrifying. The enemy they never expected. On Earth, deep within a hidden command center, General Ethan Carter watched the battle unfold. A smirk played on his lips as enemy ships exploded one after another. President Foster stood beside him. "They're confused," she observed. "They thought we had nothing left." Ethan nodded. That was the plan. For decades, the Galactic Council had believed Earth's military strength was limited. They had studied human fleets, analyzed their weapons, and thought they understood their capabilities. But they had never seen this. The truth was simple. Humanity had never shown its true strength. While the Council had been busy preparing for a simple planetary invasion, Earth had been building something else, an entire hidden arsenal, developed in secret, far from the Council's watchful eyes. Experimental warships, cloaked defense stations, cyber warfare networks capable of disabling enemy systems. The Council had believed Earth was alone and outmatched. They had never considered the possibility that they were the ones walking into a trap. The fall of a fleet. On the battlefield, the tide had fully turned. Massive human warships, built for a war they had never wanted but always expected, moved like ghosts through the enemy ranks. Their weapons tore through the Council's strongest shields as if they were made of paper. Aboard one of the alien dreadnoughts, a captain screamed into his communicator. "Our systems are failing. Shields are down." His voice cut off as his ship erupted in a ball of fire. Council formations collapsed. What had started as a show of dominance was now a desperate struggle to survive. The silent war. But Earth's attack wasn't just in space. It was everywhere. Across the galaxy, strange malfunctions spread through the Council's military networks. Weapons refused to fire. Communication lines went dead. Entire planetary defense systems shut down without explanation. In the Council's core worlds, panic spread. Even those far from Earth realized something was terribly wrong. Humanity wasn't just fighting in space. It was inside their systems, their networks, their very infrastructure. Earth wasn't just resisting. It was winning. The turning point. Inside the flagship, Chancellor Vec clenched his jaw. This war is not over. Corin's voice was hollow. Chancellor, we're losing. Vec's eyes burned with rage, but deep inside, fear had started to creep in. This was not the war he had prepared for. Earth should have been on its knees. Instead, the Galactic Council was the one bleeding. And for the first time, the mighty rulers of the galaxy realized they had underestimated humanity. Badly. The battlefield had changed. What began as a simple invasion had turned into a desperate struggle for survival. Council warships, once the terror of the galaxy, were now nothing more than burning wrecks drifting in orbit. Humanity had done the impossible. They had turned the hunters into the hunted. Every strategy the Council had prepared, every tactic they had used to dominate other species, was failing. The humans were not just fighting back. They were winning. General Ethan Carter stood in Earth's underground command center, arms crossed as he watched enemy ships fall one by one. They never saw it coming, he muttered. President Foster, standing beside him, nodded. They thought they were invincible. Now they're realizing the truth. For years, humanity had played the role of the underdog, hiding their true strength. The moment the Council had chosen war, the trap had been sprung. Every secret weapon, every hidden fleet, every cyber warfare program had been unleashed in perfect synchronization. Chancellor Vec paced inside his flagship, his mind racing. His fleet was failing. Reports flooded in, shields collapsing, engines failing, weapons disabled. How? He growled. Corin, his chief strategist, struggled to answer. They must have been preparing for this for decades. We assumed they were weak. We were wrong. Vec's hands clenched into fists. The Council had crushed rebellions, wiped out civilizations, and ruled unchallenged. Yet now, against humanity, they were powerless. The war was no longer a battle for control of Earth. It was a battle for survival. Across the Council's empire, panic spread. Entire colonies went dark. Military outposts reported strange disruptions. Human forces were everywhere and nowhere at once. The Council had believed they were the superior species, but now, for the first time, they felt fear. Ethan watched the screen as another Council flagship was obliterated. His voice was steady. This is just the beginning. Humanity had rejected peace, not out of arrogance, but because they knew the truth. The only way to be free was to make sure the enemy could never threaten them again. The war was far from over, but one thing was certain. The Galactic Council had made a fatal mistake. They had picked a fight with the wrong species. The Galactic Council's ship hovered above Earth, a silent giant watching over a stubborn world. Inside the Grand Chamber, 10 alien diplomats stood in a perfect circle. Their robes shimmered, their faces calm, but their eyes carried frustration. They had traveled across the stars to offer one final chance, one last peace deal before the war became unstoppable. Earth's representatives entered the chamber, walking with quiet confidence. General Ethan Carter led the group, his uniform crisp, his face unreadable. Behind him, President Elaine Foster stood tall, her gaze locked onto the Council's leader. The tension in the air was thick. Grand Chancellor Vec's voice was smooth but firm. Humanity, you have fought bravely, but your war is hopeless. You stand alone. The Galactic Council extends this last offer of peace. Accept our rule, and we will ensure your survival. Ethan smirked slightly but said nothing. The room fell silent. The Council's chief strategist, an insectoid creature named Corin, stepped forward. Do not mistake this for kindness. Your world is surrounded. Our fleets number in the thousands. You have no allies, no chance of victory. President Foster spoke at last. We appreciate your concern, Chancellor Vec. But tell me, what does peace look like under your rule? Vec did not hesitate. You will surrender your military. Your leaders will submit to the Council's authority. Your technology will be integrated into our systems. Humanity will no longer be free, but it will survive. The humans exchanged glances. No one looked surprised. They had heard these words before. Ethan finally stepped forward. His voice was calm, controlled. And what happens if we refuse? Corin's mandibles clicked. Then we will do what must be done. The war will end, whether you wish it or not. Your people will fall, your cities will burn, and history will remember humanity as a mistake. A long silence followed. The alien in voice stood still, waiting for the answer they expected, the answer that every weaker species had given before. President Foster sighed and shook her head. Then we have nothing more to discuss. Chancellor Vec frowned. You would rather see your species wiped from existence than accept peace. Ethan chuckled. You don't understand humans, do you? Vec's frustration grew. What is there to understand? You are cornered. Your planet will not last another cycle. Ethan's smile widened. You think we're cornered. That's your first mistake. Before the council members could respond, a hologram flickered to life in the center of the chamber. It was a live feed from one of their own warships, one of the many vessels orbiting Earth, ready to strike at a moment's notice. The image on the screen sent a shock through the alien and voice. The warship, a powerful dreadnought, was drifting, completely powerless. Its weapons were offline, its engines dead. Across the display, similar scenes played out. More ships, lifeless. Their crews in chaos. Their systems failing. Corin's mandibles twitched. What? What is this? Ethan's voice was steady. You assumed we had nothing left. That we were just waiting to die. But while you were planning your invasion, we were planning something else. The council envoys looked at each other in disbelief. Their mighty fleet, the one meant to destroy Earth in an instant, was now silent. The humans had done something. But what? President Foster leaned in slightly. We told you before, humanity will not surrender. Now you'll see what that really means. Chancellor Vec's breathing was heavy. You're making a mistake. Ethan folded his arms. No, you made the mistake. You thought we'd break. You thought we'd accept defeat just because you said so. The room was tense, filled with unspoken threats. Finally, Vec's voice dropped to a whisper. This is not over. Ethan nodded. We know. Without another word, the humans turned and walked away, leaving the Galactic Council to stare at the darkened screens, the first sign that the war would not go as they had planned. The once mighty Galactic Council fleet was in ruins. Wreckage drifted through space, the shattered remains of warships that had once ruled the galaxy without question. What had begun as an invasion had turned into a massacre. Only, it was the invaders who were being slaughtered. Humanity had done what no other species had ever dared. They had faced the full strength of the Council and broken it. Inside the command center on Earth, General Ethan Carter stood with his arms crossed, watching the battle unfold. His officers worked around him, relaying enemy positions and tracking Council fleet movements. But the fight was no longer about tactics, it was about survival. Their formations are collapsing, one officer reported. Some ships are trying to retreat. Ethan nodded. Let them run. But make sure they understand. They will never set foot near Earth again. President Foster stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. This isn't just about Earth anymore, she said. The Council thought they could control the galaxy through fear. We need to make sure they never try this again. Ethan turned back to the battle screen. Then we send a message they will never forget. Desperate escape. Aboard the Galactic Council flagship, Chancellor Vec watched in horror as his fleet crumbled. His once proud dreadnoughts were being torn apart by human warships that shouldn't have existed. His generals shouted conflicting orders. Officers ran in panic, and the once disciplined fleet was now nothing more than a collection of terrified survivors. We must retreat, Corin shouted, his voice desperate. If we stay, we will be wiped out. Vec's hands trembled. He had never known defeat. The Council had ruled the stars for centuries, bringing countless worlds under its control. And yet, here they were, humiliated, broken, and running from a species they had believed to be nothing more than primitive savages. Order the fleet to fall back, he finally commanded. We need to regroup. Across the battlefield, Council ships broke formation, their captains choosing survival over loyalty. Some managed to escape into hyperspace, fleeing to the outer systems. Others were not so lucky. Humanity's warships pursued them relentlessly, striking down any vessel that hesitated even for a moment. There was no mercy in this fight. The Council had come to exterminate Earth. Now, they were the ones being hunted. The battle ends. The war begins. As the last of the Council ships fled, a deep silence settled over the battlefield. Fire still burned in orbit, the remains of destroyed warships glowing against the black void. On Earth, millions of people stood together, watching the skies, knowing they had witnessed history. They had not just defended their planet. They had shattered the illusion of the Council's power. Inside the command center, Ethan let out a slow breath. We did it, an officer whispered. Ethan shook his head. No, he said. This was just the first battle. The real war starts now. The Council was wounded, but not dead. And humans knew one thing. Wounded enemies were the most dangerous. The fear spreads. Far beyond Earth, across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The unthinkable had happened. The Council had attacked Earth and lost. On countless Council-controlled worlds, fear took root. For centuries, they had believed the Council was untouchable, that no species could ever resist its might. But now, that belief was shattered. The humans had not only survived, they had humiliated the most powerful force in the galaxy. And if the Council could be defeated, what did that mean for the future? Rebellions, long crushed under the weight of the Council's rule, suddenly had hope. Whispers of resistance spread. In dark corners of the galaxy, oppressed species began to ask themselves a dangerous question. If the humans could fight back, why couldn't they? Chancellor Vec's nightmare. Aboard the Council's retreating flagship, Chancellor Vec sat alone in his chambers, staring at the holo display. Reports from across the Empire filled the screen. Panic, confusion, uncertainty. The other Council members were demanding answers. They wanted to know how a single planet had managed to bring the great Galactic Council to its knees. Vec had no answers to give. Corin entered cautiously. Chancellor, the Council is in chaos. Some worlds are questioning our leadership. There are rumors of uprisings. Vec's jaw tightened. Humanity will pay for this. But how? Corin asked, his voice almost pleading. We attacked with our strongest fleet, and they tore it apart. We assumed they were weak. We were wrong. Vec's eyes burned with fury. Then we will make them weak. We will not stop until Earth is nothing but dust. But deep inside, for the first time in his life, Chancellor Vec felt something unfamiliar. Fear. The Galactic Council's grand fleet hovered above Earth, a massive wall of warships stretching across the sky. From the ground, they looked like floating mountains, their metallic bodies reflecting the sunlight. They had come expecting surrender. They had left with defiance. Now, there would be no more talks, only war. Inside the flagship, Chancellor Vec stood on the command deck, his cold eyes watching the human world below. His patience had run out. Begin the assault, he ordered. Across the fleet, weapons systems activated. Energy cannons charge. Hundreds of dreadnoughts adjusted their positions, locking onto Earth's major cities. A single command would unleash destruction on a scale no species had ever survived. Vec turned to Corin. Let this be a lesson. The stubbornness of humans will end with their ashes. Earth stands alone. Or so they think. On Earth, alarms blared. Soldiers rushed to their stations. Pilots climbed into their fighters, their hands steady but their hearts pounding. Every satellite, every hidden defense system, and every last reserve of Earth's military forces prepared for the battle of survival. In a deep underground bunker, General Ethan Carter stood in front of a massive screen, surrounded by officers. He watched as red markers, enemy ships, moved into attack formation. The countdown had begun. "Status?" he asked, his voice calm. A young officer, sweating but focused, responded, "Enemy fleet is locking targets. Incoming bombardment in 60 seconds. President Elaine Foster, standing nearby, took a deep breath. "We always knew this moment would come," she said. Ethan nodded. "Then let's make sure they regret it." He turned to his officers. "Execute Protocol Phantom." A single word, a single command, and the battlefield changed forever. The first strike, or the first mistake. From orbit, the Council's ships fired their first wave of destruction. Bright beams of energy and high-yield plasma bombs rained toward Earth's surface. In their minds, this was the end. They expected to see human cities crumble, oceans boil, and mountains shatter. But something was wrong. As the first blasts should have landed, they disappeared. The plasma bombs never reached the ground. The energy beams faded midair. Some ships reported their weapons overheating. Others reported complete system failures. Panic spread through the fleet. "Report," Vec barked. An officer with wide, panicked eyes turned to him. "Chancellor, our weapons, they're not reaching the surface. It's as if something is stopping them." Vec clenched his fists. Impossible. But it was happening. The trap is sprung. The humans had not spent their time begging for peace. They had spent it preparing. High above the planet, something invisible flickered to life. Earth's hidden defense grid, a series of advanced energy barriers and countermeasures designed for this very moment. Cloaked satellites, long thought to be simple communication devices, suddenly emitted pulses of unknown energy, disrupting alien targeting systems. And then came the real surprise. Human warships, ones the Council had never seen before, decloaked from the dark void of space. Unlike the crude vessels humanity had used in past wars, these were sleek, powerful, and armed with weapons the galaxy had never encountered. Earth had never been defenseless. It had only been waiting. "The counterattack begins. Fire at will," Ethan commanded. Across the battlefield, human warships unleashed a storm of destruction. Their weapons cut through enemy shields like they weren't even there. Alien dreadnoughts, built for overwhelming force, found themselves outmaneuvered and torn apart by precise strikes. One by one, Council ships fell. Inside the flagship, Corrin's mandibles clicked in horror. Their technology. It's not possible. Vec's rage boiled over. They were supposed to be weak. But they weren't. Humanity had rejected peace. And now, the Council was learning why. The battlefield was silent, but the war was far from over. Wreckage from destroyed Council warships floated through space, a haunting reminder of the fight that had just ended. Humanity had achieved the impossible. They had crushed the Galactic Council's strongest fleet, forcing them into retreat. Yet no one on Earth was celebrating. Every leader, every commander, and every soldier knew the truth. This was only the beginning. The Council would return, and next time, they would come with more than just warships. Inside Earth's underground command center, General Ethan Carter stood before a massive screen, displaying reports from across the galaxy. Rebellions were rising on multiple Council-controlled planets. Species that had once lived in fear now had hope. "The Council is weak," President Foster said, watching the same reports. "We've given the galaxy something they never had before, a reason to fight back." But Ethan wasn't convinced this was a victory. "Hope is dangerous," he muttered. "It makes people reckless. If the Council wants to restore order, they won't just fight us. They'll burn entire worlds to make an example." Humanity had won a battle, but now the entire galaxy was watching to see what they would do next. Meanwhile, far from Earth, Chancellor Vec sat inside a dark chamber on the Council's homeworld. His eyes burned with hatred as he listened to his advisors argue. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others urged caution, fearing that another defeat could shatter the Council's grip on the galaxy forever. Vec remained silent, gripping the armrests of his throne. He had ruled for decades without opposition. He had crushed countless species beneath his rule. Yet now, the Council stood on the edge of disaster, all because of one defiant planet. "This war isn't over," he finally said, his voice cold. "Humanity has made fools of us. We will return, and this time, we will not offer peace. We will offer only extinction." Back on Earth, preparations were already underway. The victory had cost humanity dearly. Many pilots and soldiers had died to achieve what no species had ever dared to attempt. Cities had been bombed, defenses pushed to their limits, and resources stretched thin. But now, with the Council in retreat, humanity had time. Time to rebuild, time to prepare, and time to strike first. Secret alliances were already being formed with alien resistance groups. Smugglers, rebels, and defectors from the Council's ranks began contacting Earth, eager to join the fight. The Council's greatest fear was now reality. Humanity was no longer just defending itself. They were taking the war to the stars. Across the galaxy, fear and uncertainty spread. On Council-controlled worlds, governors scrambled to maintain order as whispers of rebellion grew louder. Soldiers who had once marched in the name of the Council now hesitated, wondering if they were on the wrong side of history. And in the darkest corners of space, hidden factions watched with interest. Some saw an opportunity to rise. Others feared what humanity might become if they won. Either way, one truth was clear: the galaxy would never be the same again. As Earth's leaders gathered for a final meeting, President Foster looked around the war room, her expression firm. "We all know what's coming," she said. "The Council won't stop. This war will only end when one side is completely destroyed." Ethan nodded, his gaze cold and determined. "Then we make sure it's not us." Far away, aboard a hidden Council station, Chancellor Vec stood before a secret project, one the humans had not yet discovered. Inside a massive chamber, something ancient and powerful was being awakened. His lips curled into a cruel smile. "You want a war, humans?" he whispered. "Then we will show you a war beyond your worst nightmares."